everybody to another episode of West Coast Street Knowledge. I'm your host, Gil, aka the American Cholo. I got my co-host Sunny in the house.
What's up, you guys?
And today it's my pleasure to introduce to you a former gang member, a hip hop boy, a graffiti artist, a straight artist. Man, you're like a today Renaissance man, OG Chino.
Thank you, man. Yo, thank you for having me here. Thank you, son.
No, thank you for coming on. So, Chino, let's talk about you, man. Where were you born?
I was born in Seoul, Korea,
Oh.
1967.
67, and then
Yeah.
how long were you in Seoul, Korea for?
Maybe 2 years.
Okay, where'd you go?
Bogota, Colombia.
Bogota, Colombia,
Yeah.
where the cartels were at.
No, the cartels are mostly, well, Bogota got their own cartels, but nah, the cartel is mostly Medellin, Cali. But yeah, Bogota, we had our own.
How did you go from Korea to Bogota?
My father at that time was a diplomat.
Okay.
So, he got a job going overseas and he could choose between Germany and Colombia. And then he found out that there was no Koreans in Colombia at all, like living in Colombia. So
Nothing.
he was like, I want to be one of the first. So,
Okay.
he go to Colombia.
And how many years were you guys there for?
Well, my parents are still there. Thank God they're still alive.
Oh, they're still living over there.
Yeah, they're still in Bogota. I never left. I was there till 78, so 10, 11 years.
Oh, so you were there as a little kid and you stood there for 7
Yeah, my
years.
childhood, yeah.
So pretty much all your childhood. Now, how'd you end up in Los Angeles?
Well, I think like in the 70s, there was like a big migration to the States.
Right.
Like, not only Latin America, but, Asian. My parents had a lot of close Korean friends that were sending their kids to the States. You heard great things about the States.
Yeah, right. The American dream.
Free education, the best education, this and that. And I think my parents in the late 70s were going through hard times financially, because I noticed as, first of all, my family was poor.
Okay.
In Korea we were super poor. Like when I look at my pictures, I'm like, man, we're in the slums or what? Like our clothes had holes went through it.
Right.
Because Korea was a dirt poor country.
Yeah, especially back then.
Yeah, so my dad got sent to Colombia with like almost no money. So he was a taekwondo master.
Really?
So he decided to hustle on the side and teach taekwondo.
I heard he was one of the first guys to ever. Well, he was first Korean there, so he's like.
Yeah, he's considered a founder of taekwondo in
Wow, that's pretty cool.
martial arts. Yeah, in Colombia. So he still kind of thrives off of that. You know what I mean? So he hustled that on the side, and that ended up being like another way to make a living for us. So he said, "Oh, fuck the government," because in Korea, by law, I'm pretty sure it's still the law, every young male has to serve 3 years in the military.
3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're required to go. So my dad was always, he's kind of like a conspiracy theorist, you know what I mean? Like he's like very anti-government, anti-establishment. And he was like, nah, my son's ain't going to Korea to serve in the military. So he kind of sacrificed his job to like, I'm just going to retire here and go to taekwondo.
Really?
Yeah.
So then you guys ended up coming out here to K-Town, as they know it, right?
Yeah. Well, first, I had a couple different experiences. When we first landed, we lived in a motel for a couple of weeks while my mom was trying to figure out what to do. She spoke no English. We ended up in Carson. We ended up getting a little bungalow apartment in Carson. Carson at that time, at least my part, Carson,
Right.
had no Asians that I could remember. I remember an Asian girl like in 6th grade or whatever. But it was black, Mexican, and some of the white people up there.
Right.
So my first experiences, my first friendships were like kids from the Mexican projects, basically.
Right. And then you ended up moving over to Cape Town, I heard a story when you first got there. You were what, about 10, 11 years old.
Yeah, I was 11 when we moved to Koreatown. In Carson just was just a few months, and then we moved to Koreatown. My mom, of course, wants to be close to the people she could communicate
Of course,
with,
of course.
and her friends and whatever. So we moved to Koreatown, Wilton Place on 9th Street. Look beautiful, you know what I mean? To us, America, just anywhere in LA look beautiful compared to the hood in Bogota. And we didn't live in the hood in Bogota. We actually, like when we first lived there, we lived super poor. Like I remember me and my brother seeing rats running around. That's when like our first memories,
Right.
So my dad, he was poor, but then he made it like when Korea made it progress.
Right.
That's when they started funneling money to the embassy. My dad started getting paid more.
You guys started moving on up.
And then I remember him getting like a BMW, and we moved to a house,
Nice.
hanging out with the ambassador's kids. So I got to see that part, you know what I mean? But then we moved to LA, and then all of a sudden, we're all sleeping in the same bedroom, 4 or 5 of us. It was 4 of us, my 2 sisters, my brother, and my mom. So it'd be 5 of us sometimes. Sleeping, renting a
Right. You guys were back
a room in an apartment. Yeah, man. So the ups and downs.
So how was the culture shock when you started going to school?
Oh man, I was more culture shocked by the Koreans, which is crazy to say because I'm Korean.
Right.
And I was never confused about my identity being raised in Colombia because everybody did this to me and made fun of me, right? And I knew I was different. I knew that I'm not from there.
Right.
And we were actually really proud to be Koreans because my dad made us, my mom and my dad were like, yeah, you guys are Korean.
That's right.
They gave us a lot of pride and we learned about our country. So I came here thinking, oh wow, I'm gonna go to school with like a bunch of Koreans. Man, them dudes like ESL,
Right. They were learning the language themselves too.
Yeah, so I come here, I speak no English, and like ESL classes like half Latino,
Right.
half Korean, and the Korean dudes just straight hating immediately, like, oh, this dude is weird, he's looking at me, they're looking at me weird, because I can't speak Korean.
Were you already speaking multiple languages when you went?
No, I was speaking mostly Spanish.
Spanish.
I mean, Spanish was fluent. My Korean was choppy, because I had no Korean friends in Colombia.
So you're telling me you're in the ESO, or not even ESO, you're out at break during recess, and then what happens is the Korean kids are trying to talk to you, you can't really talk to them, and then the Spanish kids.
Nah, well, even like before even recess, I remember like I had nobody to even. No, I remember. Well, actually, I remember like the first kids I played with in recess was the Mexican kids. Because they were like, oh, now they come play with us, right? Like that was the words I remember. Like,
And they speak to you in Spanish?
yeah,
So-
because when I got introduced, because I came in not at the beginning of the semester. So I came in, you know what I mean? Like I moved from Carson. So when the new kid in school.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm like in 6th grade, I get introduced to the class, like, hey, this is such and such, and he speaks Spanish, right?
So they dijeron, Chino, vete a jugar.
So then the Korean kids are already looking at me like, what? All confused, and then the Mexican kids are, oh shit. So as soon as recess came, already, I felt like closer to the Mexican kids because they were already warming up to me.
So let me get this straight. ¿Sabes hablar español?
Claro.
¿Sabes hablar más que este güey?
Yes.
Tonto que sí.
All right. I see where this is going.
Hey man, my best friend is Chicano, I make fun of him all the time and he tries.
Okay, so now you're in school. You ended up pretty much gravitating to the Chicano kids because of you coming from Colombia and you had Latino flavor in you. So then when you hit junior high, how's it going for you?
7th grade, I think that's when I started being called Chino again.
Okay.
Like in 6th grade, I was the excellent kid, like I was a good student in Colombia. In Colombia, everybody's a good student. Everybody was good. Like I didn't know about American culture.
Right.
And the street shit.
Right.
So I think I started hearing about cholos in 6th grade from my big brother.
Right.
Because he was like, yeah, there's some guys named cholos and they smoke weed on the back of the bus. And I was like, what? But then I started going to 7th grade, John Burroughs Junior High School.
Okay.
I started going to 7th grade, and then, you know, my ESL friends, some of the same ones from elementary, we started gathering up, you know, so we saw the ESL kids again. And then that's when the, you know, the homies started, what's your, you know, ¿cómo te llamas? Q me, you know, my real name, and, Chino, pinche Chino.
Te dicen el chico.
And then I was like, oh, fuck. Well, I used to be called Chino in Colombia, right?
Right.
But it was, I didn't take it offensively because it was a nickname in Colombia already. You know, it was kind of like a nickname, not so much as here.
With love.
But yeah. So, you know, they started calling me Chino, and then I think all of us kind of in the 7th grade was when we started getting into the
You start dressing a little bit different.
Lifestyle
You start
and-
picking up.
yeah.
So how was that for you? How many? I mean, did you ever really get jumped in, or were you kind of just walked in and
No.
kind of embraced by the guys?
No, like nah. I actually didn't even know what getting jumped in was till 2 years later, like 9th grade. You know, I was a year early because I got placed a year early for some reason. So I was always a year younger than everybody.
Right.
So 9th grade, I was 13, and that's when I was like, oh fuck yeah, you gotta get jumped in. And that's when I started thinking like, oh shit, I gotta get jumped in. But I think by that time, I had enough old home, you know, like
Right.
old homeboys that were like, you know, like, little Chino, and it was like a lot of love, man. Like,
That's right.
I don't think any of them wanted to see me get beat up by 3 of their homeboys either.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I seen a lot of jump-ins back then that were not really jump-ins, man. They were just rituals. They didn't fuck up their homeboy like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it changed maybe later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
Yeah, everything's changed.
Yeah.
And so then you saw Cholo life when it was pretty much at its purest.
I think it was like the end of the innocence of it, the innocent era of it. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us that were considered cholos back then were not violent dudes. You know what I mean? Like, I was never a violent dude. I got into so many fights and I lost probably most of them because I wasn't a fighting dude, but I'm like, well, if you're gonna hit me up, I'm gonna pay my hood, right? I'm not gonna rank out, but you just took that sacrifice knowing that 3-4 dudes are just gonna fucking stomp you.
Right.
But you just did it because, yeah, you gotta be down for the hood. You know what I mean? It's
And that area is actually nowadays, well, not so much nowadays, everybody's kind of calmed down much worse, but that area became one of the most dangerous parts of LA for many years.
yeah, like I think that was always like the middle ground of a lot of different barrios.
Yes.
Because when I was a kid, and that's what attracted me to graffiti so much. Like before I knew what I was reading on the wall, man, the graffiti was beautiful. And I had, living in Koreatown, I had the most variety
Right,
of graffiti
right.
because you had, of course, you had 18, but you had heartbeats, you had playboys, you know, you had Planton, you had so many different original
Established
neighborhoods
yes.
that would clash right there. You had old Filipino gangs like Satanas. You had an old Korean gang, the Korean Killers. And everybody had a different style of writing. You know what I mean? And even when MS came up, which was much later than my era,
Right.
they came up with their graffiti in Koreatown, and their graffiti was different. You know what I mean?
Of course, of course.
How did the Korean, you said Korean killers,
Yeah.
how did they react towards you?
Well, some of them, I knew them closely because my older sister,
Shout out to your sister, the Korean Killers.
you know, she's like my mom basically because, you know, I grew up without my parents. That's a whole other story here, but, you know, she was almost like the one that kind of raised me, but, you know, she was always like the rebellious, crazy girl, like, you know what I mean? Like growing up in Bogota, she was the runaway. She was just crazy when she was a little girl. So coming here, she speaks Korean well because she lived in Korea longer than me and my brother. So she clicks with the Korean kids. And she ends up with the wrong kids because, of course, she's, her whole thing was being rebellious. So she ends up hanging out with the Korean killers. And at that time, the Korean killers was just dudes.
Okay.
But she kind of set off like a whole
trend.
girl chapter because she's like, started beefing with like the dudes and you know what I mean? Like, so she like held her ground, you know what I mean? So, and then when we were growing up in Koreatown without our parents here because we're immigrants. My mom's going back and forth. We had nobody at home, like no authority.
Right.
So my sister would bring all the Korean killer dudes
Right.
to the
To
house.
party. How long had the Korean killers been established when you guys got there?
Man, I don't know, but they used to write K77K. So 77 was the year, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that was the year when they were just probably started recognizing themselves
Right.
as a gang.
And-
But these dudes were around way before that.
How many years did they go out? Are they still around or did they fizzled out?
Well, I started losing track of them, I would say, in the 90s.
Oh, that far, huh?
Yeah, they went for a while, and then other Asian gangs started forming.
Right. Yes.
So they
Yes.
started beefing with other Asian gangs, so
Right.
that prolonged.
And the Asians started having their beef like how we started having ours.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I know you were one of the first Koreans in 18, or was it,
I didn't know any other Korean or Asian in 18.
because my experience at that time, I know there was like a black chapter of 18.
Yeah,
Some
West Side.
different races from
Yeah,
18.
yeah.
So as far as you know, you were like the first one in your area, right?
As far as I knew,
That's
but,
what
but I don't.
That's
I
what they
can't
call them,
say.
OG Chino, baby.
I can't say because you just never know. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
right.
Like I remember meeting a dude from Sotel 13 on the
Yeah.
west side,
Mm-hmm.
and he was Japanese, and I was like, what the fuck, So I was like, wow. So you just never know.
That's right.
You just never know.
So then you kind of somehow luckily gravitated. Well, it seemed like the older guys really kind of looked out for you and didn't really want to get you in the mix so much.
Yeah, I think that's like my cholo story is probably the opposite of what most cholo stories are. You know what I mean? Most cholo stories are the dudes that went hard at it and served their time like you guys. You know what I mean? Like served their time and basically, what you call the street respect. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But my story is the opposite. I think I'm an example of someone that's a result of their environment, and
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like not all cholos are from the same background. You know what I mean? Like a lot of us end up in certain situations where we end up in that lifestyle, but we don't belong in it. You know what I mean? And I think my homeboys were always puzzled by it. Like,
Well, I think, well, you said you had been in multiple fights and
Yeah.
probably got your ass kicked more than you did win.
yeah.
That alone would get you respect on the streets.
And I think that's what it was, man. And I think I did it at such a young age that I think by the time I was in 9th grade, homeboys were looking at me like, oh, that's Cheeto. And,
That's the home.
because,
Yeah, that you earned your respect.
and then I was different because I'm Asian, right? So I kind of stood out too. So it's like, that made it a little bit more like, oh, wow, this guy. You know what I mean? So the act, even though I was acting like a cholo, really, but the act came off, more, like interesting. I
Right,
guess.
of course.
But
But
Taekwondo didn't help you on these fights.
Man, I wouldn't even try that shit. I would have got laughed at, dude. Like,
so then when you started coming out of your the cholo part of your life, you ended up really gravitating to hip hop, right? Or was it graffiti at that time?
both at the same time, because hip hop culture had, it was both. But even as a cholo, I was like the guy with the radio.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like we all got the homeboy that just brings out the music all the time. And
Yes.
at the ditching parties, hey Chino, you bring your boombox. You know what I mean? Like I was the guy with the radio. I was the guy that was always taping the latest songs off the radio. I was like, before I even knew about hip hop, I was pause mixing
That's right.
Zap. Like the beginning. I would go over, like just to like fuck with the homeboys.
Right.
So I was the music guy. So I think it was just automatic, man, when hip hop came out for a lot of us.
For people that don't know, what was a ditching party back in the days?
Oh man, they don't do it.
I don't know. I don't think they do them like that anymore. No.
Man, if you're from a generation that missed out on ditching parties, don't do it.
First of all, don't do it.
But you missed out.
But,
you know what I mean?
So what was going on in ditching parties?
That's when you plan, word of mouth, the whole neighborhood. Sometimes 2 neighborhoods, hey, we're gonna have a ditching party Friday. 12 o'clock at such and such park, or at so and so's apartment. You know what I mean? Because their parents ain't home. And then that's when you all ditch school, right? And you go there and you buy 40s of Colt 45, Old English. Back then it was easy because you stand in front of whatever liquor store and ask whoever looks old, hey, can you go in and buy some beer for me? All right. Right,
right, of course.
Yeah, if he was more relaxed, and then so you show up and with your weed and everything, and you got the highness, right? So, at one point we're kids, so you're all drunk, and then you have a makeout session. You play spin the bottle.
That's right.
You play your oldies.
Yeah. So what was DJ Chino playing back then?
Oh, Zap. Because back then I was I wasn't, well, I had, I was buying records, but I wasn't that knowledgeable about the oldies. I got into that later, going to the real party.
Right.
That's when I was like, oh, I gotta do this, but before I was, trying to pop. And,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, the young stuff, you know what I mean?
Was there ever a time that you actually really regretted getting into 18? There had to be.
Oh, man, yeah.
Where you knew you were over your head, right?
Yeah. Well, early on, like I said, like by 9th grade, I was already like not questioning, but I was already like kind of running tough with it. You know what I mean? Well, I thought I was running tough, but I was only 13. The big homeboys would probably just laughing, But I would say like I got kicked out of school for the first time in 9th grade, and then almost got me deported.
Oh, wow.
Because at that time, as Korean immigrants from Colombia, the only way we could get in here is student visas. And with the student visa, you had to check in with the school district.
That's right.
Every year. You had to show your grades, you go through a whole interview, and then they decide whether to let you stay another year.
Wow.
And then 9th grade, I steal a bike. Dumb stuff. So I get kicked out. They want to call my parents. I have no parents at home. At the time, my mom was in Colombia. My sister, out hanging out, who knows? There was nobody at home. So they're like, where's your parents? And I'm like, trying to make stuff up. They called child services on me. So that was already my first lesson.
Right.
I put like my whole family at risk, And then I started getting kicked out again as soon as 10th grade started. And that's all. The first time, I was still, I was banging, but, stealing a bike is not really gangbanging shit. But I think in the 10th grade was when I started getting kicked out for fighting and being gang affiliated.
So what happened? They thought about pulling your visa after that?
No, my mom actually flew over, I think within days, One of my mom's friends had to call her, and
What was that conversation like when they told your mom that her baby son was a cholo from a gang?
she had no idea what that meant.
It
No, and at that time,
So it's like, oh, more power to you.
no, and at that time it was like I don't think the school even knew that I was, you know what I mean? It was like, oh, he stole a bike, you know.
Right.
That, yeah, you said your parents were in Colombia. You were living here with your older sister. From what I know, that's a common practice for Asians, correct?
Yeah, and you know, to this day I question my parents. You know what I mean? Like we all question them because, you know, we had a lot of hardships when we were young here,
Right.
and then you don't realize it because you're happy. But now, like as I'm in my 50s, I start thinking back of like why? You know what I mean? Like no matter what the financial situation, why send your kids so far away?
Right.
And try to raise them from so far away.
But that's a common practice, right?
Yeah. So I think I came to the conclusion that for Korean culture, it was almost like bragging rights. You know what I mean? Because Korean culture is really about prestige a lot.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I don't blame it on the cultures because there's a lot of sense of pride because of the Korean War and what they went through. You know what I mean? So it's like a country that rose up from that and it became so powerful.
Yes.
That Korean pride is way up here. So it's in the mentality, like, you know, you're going to be the best at this. You know, you're the best. And they put that in your head from the time you're a little kid.
Right.
And I thank my parents for it because it gave me a lot of, you know what I mean? Like, I never had low self-esteem just because what my mom said I was the best. Like, you know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Like,
That's right.
you know what I mean? But that got taken away when I came here. And yeah, you know, the answer to that is, yeah, I think it was a lot of the Asian culture took priority over that family image
Is
than
that
really thinking about the outcome. And a lot of it also is being naive, that they really thought America was great.
okay?
They really thought their kids were safe in here. You know what I mean? They didn't know.
Is that something that you and your siblings kind of share the same feeling towards that?
Oh yeah, man.
You guys ever had that conversation with your parents?
Yeah. Not as much, just because I think we got over it. You know what I mean? Like we're like, what's the point?
Right.
And like my parents are in their 80s, and the last thing I want to give them
No.
is guilt before they, you know what I mean?
Of course.
Well, at a young age, when you came here, you need your parents.
Oh man,
Yeah.
do I realize that now? Hell yeah.
That's right.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, my cousin's Japanese, so I kind of understand a little bit about it. And I know that he needed his parents a lot. You know?
Yeah. No, man, and you don't get it back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't get that you need your parents back then. And that's why I get the lifestyle, you know, the whole LA gang lifestyle. I get it. Like, I know why kids get into it. And that's why I care.
That's right.
Just like you guys care, and that's why you're doing this. And
Right.
that's why I love that you're doing this.
That's
It's
right.
like, I care because it's like, man, we could have the same culture without hurting each other.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like that simple.
Well, I have to ask this. Why 18? That's got to be the most hated gang in the world.
Yeah, but you know what? Back then,
You had it rough.
yo, man. But back then, is
You didn't see it like that.
I didn't know. It was like the majority of the homeboys.
Right.
Some of my close homeboys ended up joining Harpies and Playboys. Because I think at one point when I was a little kid, I was hanging out with Playboy. Like I almost, you know what I mean? I started hanging out with those that were from Playboys. And because we were just in that neighborhood. But 18 was sort of like, back then it was big. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there was like a saying, everybody's from 18. You know what I mean? Like in the early 80s,
Right.
like everybody's from 18. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't like on purpose, you know what I mean? And then I found out later that yeah, 18's like really hated on, you know, like.
How were the scrimmages of fights back then? Was it that much shootings? Was it more just guys coming over and boxing and stuff like that?
Well, as far as like you know, like our age group, it was a lot of fights, right? Because we're still in school. At the same time, I had homeboys that I was in high school with that were in what 11th, 12th grade that had been shot 3 times, and
Okay.
you know, I had homeboys that you know that were way deeper in
Right.
than
Of
I
course.
was. You know what I mean? But for us, it was mostly a lot of organized fights. So because in my era, it wasn't like you. For some of us, I'm not gonna speak for everybody, but for some of us, it wasn't like you totally didn't give a fuck about life, right? Like
Okay.
some of us didn't. Some of us thought that eventually we're gonna get out of this and have some kind of future.
Right.
You know, there was, you know, but we're still down. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
so those of us, I think, we're still like, if we're in school, fuck it, let's do the homework. You know, my homeboy that had been shot 3 times was in varsity football. He was getting good grades because he was thinking something.
Right. Of course.
You know,
Were
so
you from a clique? Back then, did they have cliques?
yeah. Well, yeah, it had
Yeah.
too many
Oh.
clicks.
Yeah, but
Uh.
back then it was.
I mean, there was, you know, McManus Park, Queen Anne Park, and yeah.
So, when you started gradually walking away from the neighborhood, was there any blowback from any of the guys, like pressing up on you, or was it kind of you just kind of walked away from it? How did that transition come about?
No, because like I said, I was never. I think back then you had to have a lot of personal beef with people for you to actually be a target
Okay.
or anything. I was never a target because I never, you know, I never stabbed nobody. I never shot nobody. So no, I went through a lifestyle, but man, like, I think the situations that I could have been in, I thank the old homeboys for telling me, nah, Chino,
They had love for you.
That's
They showed
right.
you love.
like, stay home, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've been at parties where everybody jumped into cars to go bang because someone, you know, had just got jumped or whatever. And I was like ready to, which
Right,
car
right.
do I get on? And they're like, stay home. You know what I mean? Like,
Watch the girls first.
hey, and
That's right.
that's another thing too, man. I think I hung out with the homegirls more than the dudes because I just love the girls, you know.
And they probably loved you because you're different.
You know what I mean? And it was always the homegirls that stopped banging first. You know what I mean? So
Right.
so they would always like, you know.
What was your dress code like back then, Chino?
Wow.
Oh, you're just like a G. I see them.
Well, of course the dickies, the giant oversized dickies, and back then we weren't sagging. We pull them up.
Right, right.
You know, the tank tops, the creased t-shirts, you know, the tube socks. You know, we used to wear like Converse All-Stars, you know, like.
Yeah.
And I remember when like the Cortezes were first started
Right.
being
That's
worn.
right.
Yeah.
But if you remember right, the Converse All Stars, they were actually like $5.99 at the supermarket.
Yeah.
You said that last time.
They were
Hey, man.
$5.99 at the supermarket. Those were ghetto shoes.
My first pair of shoes was from the supermarket.
The Converse with the hood shoes back then, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, house shoes, the Juanitos.
The Winos, that's right.
You know.
From Payless.
Yeah, the Bumblebees, the Pendletons.
Oh, man.
Man, and one thing about being a cholo back then, it was like, fools were sharp, man. Like, you didn't come out, you couldn't go to school without your creases. No, like, you know, if your khakis were fucked up, you looked like a bum back
Yeah,
then.
but it was much more class back then than it is
man,
now.
the starch and the hairspray were just like super crispy.
That's right.
Crossing in your homies now?
What's that?
Do you ever ride the crossing in your homies now?
Nah. I hear about them through other people. My close homegirl who passed away a few months ago, La Sara, is rest in peace. But she was like one of my best friends that we started around the same era. You know, we started in the same era. She was, you know, from the west side, and she hung out with Malditos on the west side. But yeah, she she was the one that kind of, you know, like let me know about our friends, you know, like the people that we knew, how they're doing. But nah, man,
So
I went through a whole different life. After
how
that.
did you start getting? How did you come about eventually having a? It was B-Boy Records you had, right?
Yeah, a record store.
And so did you just start off getting records for yourself at first?
Yeah, I was always a crazy record fanatic, you know, just because I was the music dude, and my father was actually, you know, like, really into records. So even as a little kid in Colombia, he used to always bring stacks of records home. So I was always like into records. So as soon as we moved to the States, and I started listening to the radio here and listening to like funk and you know all that.
Since you're talking about records,
Yeah.
half these kids probably don't know what a record is.
Well, you know those circular black things.
You don't know, seriously. Half
They're
these
made
kids
out of
don't know
vinyl.
what they are.
Yeah, they're made out of vinyl. You know.
So then you started collecting these records, but what came about to you that you eventually say, you know what, I want to open up a record.
Yeah, because you know you collect so many records at one point, and I think, well, when hip hop music came out, I fell in love with hip hop music, right? Because to me, it's like an extension of like funk and the shit that we're listening to. And then, so hip hop records come out, and I'm like, oh shit, hip hop and rapping and all this. So I start buying all that, and I think once you start understanding hip hop music, you understand that DJing is just a natural part of it. So I immediately start wanting to be a DJ. And I got my first setup in 86, 87.
Okay, that's
yeah.
old school.
Yeah.
And so now you're DJing. Are you doing parties and stuff, or are you just kind of?
Yeah, parties. Back then the house parties were, you know, were popular,
they were.
the thing. And but I never really considered myself a DJ. I just think I did it at home. You know what I mean? Like, cause I like doing it. But I used to run with homeboys, you know, DJ Motivate, who like later started producing Black Eyed Peas or whatever. You know, like we grew up in the neighborhood together, and I used to run with him, watch him DJ house parties.
Right.
You know, he might let me play here and there. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And then by that point you went from the Cholo style. Were you a B-boy at that point? How were you dressing when you were in 86 now?
Yeah, I think for a time I was always like a crossover of
Right.
both, you know, like I could never completely let go of the whole Cholo style, like, you know, always the Pendletons, I never let go of the Pendletons.
That's right.
You know, I never let go of the hats, you know. But yeah, I would, you know, start wearing Adidas and
Run DMC. So what were your earliest records that you had that you can remember? Your first hip hop record that you actually purchased?
Oh man, first rap record was Rapper's Delight.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
first
right.
rap record, yeah, it was Rapper's Delight. Like probably as soon as it came out, you know.
And how did you move so quickly? I know I did my research on you. You ended up working under, I think it was promoting. Was it
Rick Rubin, yeah, you know, super music mogul, Rick Rubin, yeah. I ended up working under his label.
And you were promoting Sir Mix-a-Lot, not
Sir Mix-a-Lot, yeah. Man, you know, it's weird how the life journeys, you know what I mean? Like, and I thank, you know, I thank the gang life for it, because if it wasn't for gang life, I wouldn't have gotten into hip hop as much. You know what I mean? Because hip hop I looked at as like almost like a savior. You know, like
A whole different bunch of avenues. Right?
yeah, like I could still get the girls and be cool and
yes.
not get beat up for it.
So what did promoting? Was it Baby Got Back or
Yeah,
which-
Baby Got Back. So, you know, after the record shop folded, you know, it didn't last. You know, the record shop was in the hood in South Central at the time, and it was in South Central because I just thought hip hop belonged, you know, is the hood thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
like nobody's gonna buy records in Hollywood. That's what I was thinking, hip hop records. But that was a mistake too, because in the hood, man, people ain't trying to buy records every
Right.
day.
right.
You know, so I wasn't making money, yeah. But it became a beautiful place, as far as like almost like a community youth center or
That's
something.
right.
Everybody hung out there. Everybody that hung out there was almost like came in there in peace. You know, dudes from Rolling 60s walk in there, but everybody came in peace because it was hip hop. It was something they could relate to. You know, and I think after the record store closed, through the record store I had made enough relationships in the hip hop world, right? Like people in the industry or whatever. That a good friend of mine, Mike Nardone, who still does radio to this day, he recommended me when Rick Rubin moved out here to LA to start his record label.
Yeah.
You know, when he separated from Def Jam.
Right.
So I got interviewed by Dan Charnas, who was my boss, the A&R man. Shout out to him. And I got hired as the promotions guy. And my first project was Baby Got Back.
And how are you promoting that? I mean, nowadays these guys just get on the internet, Instagram, this and that.
No,
Well, how did you get the qualifications to do this?
that's what I'm saying. It's just because in that era there was no real hip hop industry. You know what I'm saying? There was nobody with experience promoting a rap record
right.
that much. Everybody was learning, so it
Set
wasn't.
a blueprint.
Yeah, so it was like, well, you know, maybe a generation before me that set up the blueprint, but it was still not a set up industry where people could come in here with a resume, like I done this and that.
Right.
Hip hop was so new that it was like, what? You know this about hip hop? That's good enough. You know what I mean? So me just having a record shop, me just having a reputation around LA for being in the hip hop scene was enough. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. So what did you do? You go around putting
Oh, yeah.
posters up? I mean,
Well, that too. That was the street promotions part of it. But promotions back then, before the internet era and all that, was the phone, right? The long distance phone calls, because I had to call every radio station, and then you had to figure out what time because there wasn't that many rap DJs.
that's right.
They will only show up at the station when they did their mix shows. So you had to figure out what time they were gonna be there and try to call them at that time. It was hard, man. And then sometimes you get a whole lot of phone numbers at home because the lists, were private. Every promoter had a list, and you would trade with them because you were friends with them. So you end up with someone's phone number at home. Like I'd end up calling like DJ Red Alert in New York, legend, and I'm calling him at home during dinner time, and he's super pissed. Like, what the fuck is this? Man, it wasn't easy.
Well, was there any time that people would have to take like bribes or kickdowns to sit there?
Oh man, that payola shit is real.
Oh, so
Yeah, it's real. I got asked. Well, back then it wasn't, because hip hop wasn't that rich at the time in
Right.
the early '90s. I would get asked for dumb shit like a VCR. And I would think they were joking, like a radio station,
Right.
and, a radio DJ from another state be like, "Hey man, I'll put your record on the charts. I'll report it, and but you can send me a VCR." And I thought it was a joke, but I told my boss, like, "Yo man, ask me for a VCR." He's like, "Oh, well, should we send it to him?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's crazy." Yeah.
So how long did you do that for?
Till '94.
Okay, so you did it for a few years.
Yeah, a few years.
And then you stepped out.
Well, well, it was half and half. I was being fired basically for not being political enough. You know what I mean? Because in the record industry, you really can't go inside a staff meeting and say that your record isn't doing good.
Okay.
That's the whole politics of the industry. And then, me being from the lifestyle that I came from, I always became friends with the artist.
Right.
Like with my whatever rapper I was working with, I became more friends with that person than the record company.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was always on the artist side of it, and I was like, man, fuck the record label. You know what I mean? So
Oh.
I started kind of speaking out too much. Like
You went against the grain.
yeah, or come in the staff meetings saying, not having good news. Like Sir Mix-a-Lot's second album was doing horrible, and I would say, hey, it's not doing good. What radio station is it getting? No, it's not. You know what I mean? So they immediately look at it as, oh, you're not doing your job.
How many or what old school rapper guys back in the '90s were you kind of in contact with or kind of friendly with that we would know?
Wow, I don't know.
You had Sir Mix a lot.
Nah, I mean friendly with back then. Yeah, I mean.
I mean that not even friendly, just that you kind of rubbed elbows with and kind of saw in the industry
well,
starting to grow
you know,
up.
like the record label I was working for at the time, Rick Rubin wasn't really interested, you know, in hip hop at the time. I think that's when he was going more into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you know what I mean. His passion was,
Right.
you know, rock. But like I never even like I met the dude like twice, and I worked for him for years. You know what I mean? Because he didn't really come to the office. You know what I mean? I would see him at the holiday party.
Right.
So I don't think he had that much interest in like going hard at hip hop. So for me, it was like Sir Mix-a-Lot and a few other artists like Chino XL that I worked with directly, Cuesta Mad Lad. But they were very underground at the time.
Right.
And because of, you know, the label situation at the time, they weren't being pushed. They weren't being pushed at that level that they should have been pushed. You know what I mean? So I didn't like directly work with a lot of the big artists.
Did you feel or think at the time when you were working around that hip hop was gonna get so huge as it has?
Nah, I didn't think it was gonna get this big. I think I started seeing it once Puffy kind of changed hip hop overnight. You know, made it glossy and shit. You know.
Was there ever a time that you just, I hit it? Just thought.
Oh,
I hit
yeah,
it.
yeah,
This is the spot. What's your highlight?
Yeah, I think I came back to hip hop. You know what I mean? But I think for a while, like, you know, when it became super commercial, and I think it's still super commercial.
Yes, it definitely
You know what
is.
I mean? But now I started to learn that there's people putting out, you know, good hip hop that you just gotta search for more. You know, but
Yeah, now that I just remember now. When do you remember when you met Conejo?
so how you know you know I know Conejo? No, we got a history, man. Conejo and I go way back to the beginning days. I knew of Conejo of two ways, and he probably doesn't know that there was two ways. That
He's gonna find out.
you know, I had a girlfriend from Florencia when I was when I came out in Teen Angels.
Okay.
It was me and my girlfriend from
You know,
Florencia.
Your from 18 wouldn't be happy about that.
Oh no, a lot of them. No, but nah, man. But you know, back then he was like, shit, she's fine. And my girlfriend wasn't directly from Florencia. Her family was
Right.
Florencia. You know what I mean? Her sister, and they were from Florencia, like hard. But you know, my girlfriend at the time, she, you know, dressed up like a chola once in a while. She'd go to the parties, but she was the cutesy, girly girl, you
Right.
know. And then her little sister was the one that said Beatrice. Her name was Beatrice. That I ended up kind of, after I broke up with her, we ended up keeping in touch. And when I had the record store, somehow Beatrice and I came in contact again. And Beatrice was the one that said, hey, you gotta meet my homeboy Conejo. He raps, you know, a cholo rapper. And I was like, yeah, cholo rapper, really? And I always thought that there would be a cholo rapper because it's only natural, right?
Right.
And I was like, wow. But then after that, I had another girlfriend shortly after who was from Easy Riders. And then she started telling me about Conejo.
Okay.
So I'm like, two people already, you know, second person. And by that time, me and my homeboy that I grew up with, Motivate, he has a studio set up in downtown. This is around 91. And then, yeah, that's when I started bringing Conejo over there to the studio, him and Bandit.
Right.
Uh-huh. And it's a trip because Conejo, like just not that long ago when I, you know, reconnected
Right.
with him, he was telling my homegirl her story. And Conejo was like, man, me and Chino used to be from enemy hoods. Like,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
when I was working in New York, you know, working in music or whatever, Conejo got a hold of me and he sent me a demo tape. And before he started going hard with the CDs,
Right.
like before he really blew up, he started sending me some cassettes. And the package used to be all dead end harpies. And I used to be like, homeboy, like, okay. But no, much love to him, man. And
That's right.
man, so proud of his success right now.
Yeah, for sure,
You know,
man.
like
Shout out
he-
to Conejo.
And that's somebody that's really went through it.
Yes.
You know, like
That's a great story, man. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully you'll come on. We're still looking for you, Conejo. So, hey, so you were, from what I read, you're one of the people may not know this, and especially in Texas and Dallas, you're one of the original graffiti guys out there, man.
Well, I think I was there at a good time, and I was lucky, man. I was like, I think I had a lot of like beautiful, beautiful, lucky moments in my life. You know what I'm saying? That I got to like witness like historic shit, and I think being in Dallas, that's after I lost my job here.
What year was that when you went to
95.
Dallas? Okay, so you go to
So
Dallas.
I lose my job at the record company. I'm like totally like disillusioned about the record business, and I don't know what, like I didn't finish college or anything. I don't have a resume to go get a job anywhere. So my sister, she's always looking out for me. She's like, "Oh, I'll get you a job in Dallas. You gotta go to Dallas and work for a law firm or some shit like
Right.
translating because you could speak Spanish." And I was like, "Oh, fuck it, I need a job." I move out there. My friends there are like the DJs because I knew them from doing my radio calls.
Right.
So immediately I'm like, day one I'm hanging out with the hip hop scene, right? Like, "Oh, Chino, you're here. I would take you to the parties." I think one of the first nights I went out, I met Erykah Badu when she was
Oh, wow.
just performing around town, around Dallas, and the group was Erica Free, her and her cousin. And then I met a graffiti writer. I met a graffiti writer not long after. And I was like, "Oh shit, I paint graffiti too." And we started painting together. Little did I know that just the timing was right. And then we started, the graffiti we were doing started coming out in the newspapers. And a lot of the young homies now that grew up to be incredible, like crazy big artists are like, "Man, Chino, he used to influence me when you were painting." I was
Right.
like, man, but he was.
I don't think a lot of people know this about you. You are an amazing artist, man.
Oh, thank you, man.
Straight up, you
Thank
when,
you.
when did you kind of start knowing that you had that skill of actually drawing and doing all that stuff?
Shit, I think all my life, man. I think since I was a little kid, as far as I could remember, I was drawing. And
Cartoon?
huh?
Cartoon?
Yeah, actually, I know cartoon also from 88, 89, from my record shop days. I think he was airbrushing cars.
He was barely starting back
Yeah, his name was Flame. Flame
Flame.
from Flame West Coast artist. Yeah, yeah, I know cartoon. Yeah, when I see him at events, I always say, "What's up?" Yeah.
Chino's a LA original too, homeboy. What do you think?
Yes,
Come on,
I noticed
homeboy.
that. I
Chino's.
noticed that.
So
I actually know cartoon.
so
Yeah. Oh,
so
nice.
when so you're in Dallas, you're doing the whole graffiti thing. How long were you out there for?
I was there only 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. I was, I lost my job there too because it turned out that the law firm I was working for was a whole illegal operation, and the feds came down crashing. Yeah, the feds came crashing down on me.
Did you get did you get this a lot or anytime? Because I mean, it's kind of funny because you were going out there to be a Spanish translator, right?
Yeah, and work for the law firm. Just I was actually almost like managing the law office at one point, like telling everybody what to do. Yeah.
Did you ever get any Latinos speaking Spanish thinking you couldn't speak Spanish?
All of them, but that was my job because the car accidents, all the Latinos that got in car accidents, it was my job to sign them up and interview them, what happened, blah blah blah. So I would sit down and start speaking Spanish, and they were like, "Oh shit!" yeah.
So then you make a transition. So you're in California. You've got all these years in Cali. You're now in Texas. 2 years graffiti. You end up going where to Brooklyn?
Yeah, Brooklyn, New York. And that happened because, in that, to survive in Dallas after I, that job
After the feds.
disappeared, I just started selling weed. You know what I mean? Just selling weed, and I got really relaxed because for I would say almost a whole year, I was just selling weed, shooting pool and painting graffiti. every day.
In Dallas or
In Dallas.
oh
In
wow, you were
Dallas.
selling weed in Dallas that time. That was
Yeah.
dangerous time to sell weed. That's like selling.
Yeah, and then the weed business started getting bigger and bigger to the point where I started getting a bit nervous. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And then,
especially out there.
And then, one night I come home and the apartment, well, it's like those big apartment complexes, and the complex right next to me is getting raided. And I'm, of course, no, it's not for me, but shit, that started making me think. And I'm 29 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, what's my life come to? Like, I'm here, like, scared of getting arrested when supposedly you know what I mean? Like, my
Yes, yes,
lifestyle
of
should have
course.
been, far from that. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not even gang related or nothing. It's just illegal at the time.
Yes, yes.
So that's what gave me a wake up call, and I started calling my friends in New York because I didn't want to come back to LA, and I always wanted to move to New York for some reason because of the hip hop thing, I guess.
Right.
And ended up getting a job, with DJ Honda, who was an
Wow.
artist at the time, and that was my first job, and ended up getting a job with Fat Beats, and just doing random hip hop shit,
And those are all legends of the scene,
Eventually, right?
right? Right. So what were you doing out there in New York? And how long were you out there for?
Well, I was there for 16, 17 years.
Oh wow!
Long
Oh
time.
wow!
So I turned, as soon as I turned 30, I turned 30 in New York, so I moved there right before I turned 30, and I stayed there till, late 40s, man.
So what's if you can break down California, Dallas, New York, what's the vibe in all those different cities that you were in?
Shit, definitely different vibes, man. The stereotypical vibes, they're true. LA people definitely more laid back. Definitely California love, and
Right.
a lot of hospitality. And New York, yeah, it's true. People are harsher, but it's a lot more truthful. You know what I mean? Like when the homies ain't got time for you to let you know, like, hey, don't call me right now. You know what I mean? Like,
That's
there's
right.
no excuses. So yeah, New York is that, and Dallas. Wow, man, that's some other shit too. Like I was surprised how Dallas, and it says a lot about America. Going from LA, knowing so many people in LA that have gotten killed and gotten in trouble
Right.
with the law, and then going to Dallas and seeing how everybody that I was meeting was in the system. You know what I mean? Everybody was on probation. It's almost like, wow, like, is this systematic? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. It's a trip, the South. You know what I mean? It's a
Have
trip.
you ever done any kind of time?
Nah, man, I did, I think, 2 nights in juvenile hall.
For the bike, for the bike.
I did East Lake. I could say I did East Lake for 2 nights.
So, I mean, you've hit the spectrum of a lot of the United States, and you saw, especially out here in L.A., you saw back in like the early '80s, it wasn't that racial out here.
No,
And then you kind of saw it a little more racial. Out in New York, it's not that racial at all.
No, I think New York, I didn't see a lot of racial. Nah, not that was obvious to me. You know what I'm saying? And I think New York, just because everyone's living in close quarters, you just can't help but to learn about the next culture. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's beautiful, man. Like, I walk around Chinatown, you see black kids getting dumplings after school. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful thing. And I think LA back in those days, yeah, I think I came back to LA when I was living in New York, like in the mid 90s. I came back to LA
Okay.
to visit, and then I hadn't been to LA in a couple of years. And that's when one of my homies said, hey man, there's a lot of racial shit going on. People are killing each other just because they're black or Mexican.
Right.
And I was like, wow, really? And that's when I started hearing more and more about it. But back in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there was none of, like, blacks and Mexicans were the same. You know what I mean? And even me being Korean, I was considered the same. You know what I mean? There was none of that.
But back in the 80s, wasn't it more like everybody knew their place? everybody stayed in their own zone and didn't evade
Yeah.
somebody else's.
Yeah, I
And
think everybody kind of had them. Yeah, the territories were more defined, and
Right.
and I think it was the crack era that kind of made those boundaries change. You know what I mean? When
nowadays, it's like everything is racial. Every single thing you say something, it's racial. You think something,
yeah,
it's racial.
yeah.
Even if you try to talk about something from the past, they look at it as you like you're being racial, and it's not. It was just that's the way it was back then. Everybody had their own zone, their own space, their own lane,
Yeah, yeah.
and now it's just like everybody's merging, but at the same time, they don't know how to do it peacefully.
Man, like back then, I think we would say shit in our regular conversations that would be considered racist
Yeah.
today. But
Yeah.
back then it wasn't. It was just, it is what it is. We're just talking. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
it was open talk.
I like
Yeah.
to use the analogy with the Rocky movie.
Uh-huh.
They call Rocky all kinds of wops and all kinds of things. You couldn't put a movie out like that nowadays.
No, there's a lot of
Way
stuff.
too controversial.
yeah.
But back then, it was cool because everybody knew their lane. They knew it wasn't really. It wasn't really meant to be really racial. It was just that's how you talk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And nowadays, it's just everybody just.
So now let's fast forward after all that. You're in New York 16 years. You still miss New York?
Oh, yeah, I missed the shit out of New York, yeah.
So now you come back to LA and you got I heard a very good very good restaurant out here. How did that come about?
Again, my sister.
Ah.
Nah, well, you know, my sister never left Koreatown, man. Like, she's been here since the late 70s, and Koreatown has been her little pocket, you know what I mean? So her connections or whatever, her friends, and, you know, so that it came through that. Like, you know, my hip-hop career kind of came to an end, too, because the whole digital era came in. I came from an era where we were pressing records and cassettes and
Right,
selling
right.
those things, and so that all ended, and I was trying to figure out again what to do with my life. You know what I mean? So like trying to be an artist is a struggle, and I don't have a resume still, you know. So my sister's like, "Hey, one of my homies' bars is going out of business. You know, you always at parties and shit. You always at bars. You always wanted to have a bar. Why don't you go check it out?" And then I checked it out. I was like, "Wow, the space is dope." You know, it was a reason for me to come back home to LA. And then he's like, wow, I could put my whole, you know, passion for music into this, like set up the DJ booth, have all the DJ friends come through. It just made sense, you know. But yeah, but financially, of course, I had to depend on loans. And, you know, my sister, please can you lend me some money for this. And I'm still paying her. I'll be paying her for life. But
The most important question, as far as I'm concerned, you've been to Texas, you've been to New York, you've been to California. Which women are the best?
what?
Women.
Which women are the
Well-
best?
Well, I love all three, but none of the above. No, I'm just kidding. Nah, well, I also spend a lot of time in Colombia.
Yeah, I was to say you didn't know about
And I
Colombia.
just gotta say the Colombian woman.
Ah.
Off the hook.
You've actually you've embraced it. It's to me it's almost seemed like you've got Colombian blood, you got Mexican blood, you got the whole mixture. You got you got
Hey man,
everything.
I
brother.
feel super lucky. You know, super lucky to have experienced, you know, all those things. You know what I mean, and to be able to feel a part of all that. You know what I mean? Like when I go to Colombia, man, you know, they make me feel Colombian. You know what I mean? They make
Even
me
the way
feel
he
at
says
home.
it,
It's
No, yeah.
Even the way he says it. He says it with pride.
you know, it's beautiful. It's beautiful how people embrace you, and you know.
How have you been to Korea?
Yeah, and beautiful there too. You know, like my friends in Korea, you know, I wish I could go there more. You know, it's just so far and so expensive to go there.
Right.
But yeah, I wish I could go there and visit, you know, the friends there too. You know, and all these friends I made through hip hop. You know what I mean? And that's the beautiful thing about the worldwide like hip hop family. You could travel everywhere and they receive you, and hopefully, you know, it'll be the same for like the cholo world. All the cholos can travel
That's
around.
we're gonna make OG Chino the ambassador for all the.
Is South Korea got a lot of big hip hop following?
Yeah, big hip hop following
Who's
and
your favorite artist out there?
I don't really know, but I know for sure that they're really into the West Coast
Right.
stuff. You know what I mean? They're really into the West Coast stuff, and I think there's a guy from here, from LA, that's doing hip hop events and bringing like Snoop and people like that out to Korea, and so yeah, Korean hip hop scene is big. It's not all K-pop.
Right. So are you still drawing stuff and are you putting stuff in galleries, or what are you doing with your art?
Nah, I never really had a gallery show. Like I just draw and paint and whatever. I'm painting. I paint. I'm painting a piece right now, like a Kobe piece in El Sereno, and I'm just doing that because someone asked me to do it. But it's not. Yeah, it's not like I up until this COVID thing, I haven't had the time to just go out and paint.
How's the COVID affected your business, man?
Well, it's shut down. It shut down, not permanently. I plan to reopen as soon as we can reopen. I was lucky enough to get one of the loans.
Okay, great.
That's not really. Well, yeah, basically it's gonna cover, a little bit, but it's not gonna help me stay alive. You know what I mean? So I'm just hoping for
How
the
many
best.
how many employees did you have to lay off?
Shit, 30.
Oh wow.
31,
Wow.
yeah.
That big?
Yeah. Well, the place is not that big, but it's just a lot of different shifts. You know what I mean? The service industry is a lot of part time.
What's the name of the restaurant?
Escala.
Escala.
Koreatown.
And what's Escala mean?
Escala means a few things. It means scale, but not weight scale. So nah, escala like scale size wise. Scaling up, like going
Right.
up. Scale like a musical scale, and also means layover. And for me, it was the meaning of layover more because my mom was always tengo escala en Los Angeles because she would travel to Korea. So us like growing up without our parents here all the time. When the escala was the time when we saw our parents.
All right,
The
that's
layover
great.
time,
That's
yeah.
great. So what kind of food you guys making over there?
It's Colombian mostly, and with some Korean touches to it. The food that I kind of grew up eating in
Right.
Colombia, because my mom was always trying to cook Korean food in Colombia, but she would always have to use certain Colombian ingredients.
Substitutes, right?
Yeah. So, and I did it not because I'm some kind of like, restaurateur. I did it because I had no idea what to do about the food till the very last minute. Like my sister was yelling at me, like, "What are we gonna do? Like hamburgers, what?" And then I was like, "You know what? Let's just do our favorite food, Colombian and Korean."
That's right.
And then she was like, at that point, she didn't even care. She was like, "Just do it."
That's right.
And it worked out, man. It worked out because it brought like a beautiful combination of people together. You know what I mean? Like the Koreans in Koreatown, Koreatown is mostly Latino, all the
No,
Latinos
yes.
that come. And then he brought like the Colombian community that's all spread out all over LA, brought them together. You know what I mean?
It's a beautiful
It
thing.
worked out. Yeah, it worked out.
It's a beautiful thing. I heard you guys also do like there's DJs there at times.
And all the time.
Oh,
it's-
really?
Well, it's so many things, right? It's like hip hop is a big element. Hip hop is a big element. So, yeah, a lot of LA's, legends come through. A lot of young up and coming dudes come through. Yeah, it's a nice creative space too.
You've got any date that you thinking about reopening, or how you guys working that out right now?
I gotta just go by the rules, but we've been closed all this time because we never really got too many to-go orders and things like that.
Right.
But I think at this point I'm gonna go ahead and open it up just for the to-go and all that,
Absolutely.
because I need to keep at least a few.
Something.
Well, no, I'm not.
Coming in, right?
Well, it's not. Well, I'm not gonna make money, but just to keep a few
Employees going. Yeah,
you know what I
nice,
mean?
of
Because
course.
they're eager to get back to work, so at least to get them started. But as soon as they let us open up, man, I gotta work with it and open. Like
Well, we're definitely gonna support this guy. Will probably take about 3 meals, but he's gonna pay for it, so you're gonna be
Yes,
balling
sir.
out. So Chino, before we wrap this whole thing up, where exactly is your restaurant at, brother?
The heart of Koreatown, 6th Street and Kenmore Avenue.
That's right. And you're gonna hopefully be opening up also for takeout orders, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna do that like pretty soon, like in the next few days. But man, hopefully, hopefully we can all get out, get out a little bit more soon.
Yeah. So how are you dealing with the COVID right now?
I'm good. I've always been a loner, so I like my alone time at home. Listening to my music and painting and doing all that. But man, I feel for like the people that need the social interactions out there. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people are just going crazy being trapped in the house and stuff.
Right.
So,
Hey, when you're at home, do you play records or you listen to
records, man.
There's something about that scratch when it's going, right?
Yeah, something about those records. You know what I mean? And some of those records you're not gonna find on the internet either. Like, so yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have a big collection because you forget what you have. So it's almost like you're discovering your own collection sometimes.
How many records do you think you got?
Oh, I don't know. It's definitely in the 20,000s, maybe. 20,
Really? Oh wow! Are these alphabetized or you got a bunch of crates?
Well, since I moved all my stuff back from New York, I haven't really unpacked my records. So no, it's
How long have you
not
been
this
back
one.
in New York?
Well, I've been back in LA for the last 6 years
Right.
since I opened. No, but I just vacated my apartment just a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
In
20,000
New York,
records.
yeah.
It's not
That's
that.
a lot of
So,
records.
so what do you got? You got a crate, and you kind of say, you know what? Let me go hit this crate right now.
Yeah, and it's fun because it's like wow, it's like toys, like a little kid with toys.
That's right. Hey, Chino. Well, I want to just thank you very much for coming on our platform, brother. You shared some straight history, man. You're a world of knowledge, brother. And I just want to thank you for coming on.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for coming.
No, thank you, Sonny, man. Because to me, it's like I don't know. I almost feel like well, I'm super honored to be here because I almost don't feel like I deserve this platform because you had some real gangsters here. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And I don't want to come off as the dude to represent that. I'm like I said, I want to represent for us kids that went through it that maybe shouldn't have gone through it. You know what I mean? And hopefully a lot of young people out there kind of could think about their own lives and their own families and realize that maybe you don't belong in this.
That's right. So where can people find you on social media?
Instagram is OG_Chino. And I think it's just OG Chino on Facebook.
That's right, brother. Well, Chino, it's a pleasure. And
Hey, thank you, man.
To me, you're just as gangster as anybody that's ever been on this platform. Man. So thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you.